go. And with that tragic video of what's happening in Ukraine, we welcome you to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. 1,000 days have passed since Russia's full-scale, illegal and brutal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian military have surprised the world with the resilience of their defense, not least the war criminal Putin, who expected to take over the country in a few days. But Ukrainians have paid a terrible price. Along with the casualties on the front lines, civilians have been the victims of an untold number of war crimes, including the kidnapping and killing of children. Whether the perpetrators of these crimes will ever be brought to justice remains to be seen. We can only hope. To discuss what the war has shown the world, I am pleased to welcome back Stefan Korshak. He's senior Defense Correspondent at the Kyiv Post and a regular contributor. Stefan, welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Pleasure as always. So let's start with the fundamental question. What has Ukraine learned from these 1,000 days of this tragedy?
Okay, well, probably the main message, the main lesson is that, yes, they can resist. Yes, they will resist. Yes, they are not going to give up. Yes, Russia can be stopped. Yes, Russia cannot just overwhelm Ukraine just because Russia decided that it wishes to overwhelm Ukraine. At the start of the war, the Ukrainians knew that they would fight, but they weren't sure whether that fight they could manage, and I'd say that the biggest lesson 1,000 days down the line is that they now are absolutely convinced that they will fight under all circumstances. They'll use their own resources. They'll take resources that other countries offer them, but the feeling here is that they must depend on themselves, and it's their will to fight that's driving everything. I'd say that that's the main lesson from having been in a war for 1,000 days.
Understood. Now, some countries, having suffered losses like that, might have gone in the opposite direction. Are you seeing a stiffening of resolve against the Russian war, or are you also hearing pockets of, well, maybe we should start to negotiate a peace?
You can find that, but statistically, I mean, there are surveys out. It's very small. And it's a question of degree. There will be, if you look, you can find people who say, well, we can't defeat Russia, so we need to find a different way to fight the war. But nobody's talking about surrender. It's rather what's the best way forward so that we can get a peace that we can live with. And pretty much everybody understands that simply accepting a ceasefire, accepting a peace, accepting some kind of temporary break in hostilities, that's just that.
Understood.
I'd say across the country, the idea that Russia could be trusted based on its word, and were Ukraine to stop fighting without absolutely ironclad security guarantees, that's just seen as foolish everywhere.
Right. Well, I guess that based on historic experience, it's not surprising that that opinion exists. Now, tell me a little bit about how the foreign support for Ukraine is viewed within the country. So, both in terms of aid, accepting and protecting refugees and so on, but also in terms of military equipment.
Well, the Ukrainians they're absolutely grateful. They understand that the fight would be orders of magnitude more difficult, and by that that means it destructive in material, destructive in life if other nations weren't helping. I would not say that there is anywhere the idea that, well, if the outside world cut off its assistance to Ukraine, then that's it, we can't fight. It would be a more difficult fight, but the fight, overwhelmingly, the thinking is that the fight would continue. There is a certain reticence, a certain hesitance on the part of Ukrainians to point fingers and say this country should do more. This country is saying one thing and delivering another, because the Ukrainians, they're like any people. They have pride. They don't want to be, they don't want to owe somebody else, but they understand that more outside help, that saves Ukrainian lives. So, if you press them, you can find educated Ukrainians will say, yes, well, the United States is very helpful. However, there are ways that the help could have come faster and it could have been larger scale. I would say that the Baltic states, the Poland, the Scandinavian states, Britain, those are the countries that the Ukrainians, generally speaking, will say, yeah, those are the ones that Ukraine can really rely on. Those are Ukraine's best allies.
Really stepped up to the plate. Certainly, Poland with taking on the largest number of refugees from Ukraine, the numbers speak for themselves. Now, I must ask you what the response has been to reports from the White House that Ukraine will be able to use ATACMS missiles, on Russian soil. How's that being taken?
Well, it's, I'd say the general population takes it as, oh, that's nice to hear. We'll see what happens, because the flood of information is just so overwhelming of new developments and new possibilities, and this might change the way that the war is being fought in a certain way, that news of ATACMS is not a sea change. It is another potentially positive development. And so it's taken as, oh, that's good news, but we're going to have to see, how that will play out on the battlefield. The specialists, the people who watch this sort of thing for a living, the soldiers, guys like me also, they just zero in on, and how many missiles will there be? Because It's just, it's numbers and material.
Right, absolutely. Now, in the last couple of minutes that we have left, Stefan, I want to get your view on the war crimes that have been committed in Ukraine by the Russian military. Bucha, of course, stands out, but there have been up to 3,000 cases which have been documented. What is the view in Ukraine about bringing these perpetrators to justice? How is that going to be done? Is there a body responsible for making it happen?
Well, from the Ukrainian side, there is a Ministry of Justice, and it has been very diligent with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and they've been very diligent in gathering evidence, developing cases, and bringing the country's law enforcement agencies to a point where they could prosecute probably tens of thousands of individuals for war crimes. And it's a huge net. And another aspect of it is that this war is being fought under a degree of electronic observation that no war ever has been. So the documentation, the videos, the photographs, the smartphone snaps is just overwhelming compared to potential evidence for war crimes in previous wars. So when one says prosecution, one is talking about a task that is orders of magnitude bigger than any other war that probably has ever been fought. And the scale of the war itself is huge. So if you ask the Ukrainian law enforcers, what are you going to do about that? They say, well, we'll do our job. And they don't really have a good answer on how big the prosecutions might be or where they might be made. Or
in fact, if, it's difficult to imagine someone like Putin actually being sent to prison or even being placed in a position where he could be arrested and tried in, let's say, the International Criminal Court or even a Ukrainian court. Stefan Korshak, thank you very much for coming along and sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Stefan. That's all from this episode of World Talks. Goodbye for now.